Come listen to my story about a man named Jed. A poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was shooting at some food. And up from the ground come a bubbling crude. Oil, that is. Black gold. Texas tea. Well, the next thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. Kinfolk said, Jed, move away from there. Said, California is the place you ought to be. So we loaded up the truck and moved to Beverly. Alright, I'm going to do something a little different than I normally do because this whiskey is a little different. This is a Nc'Nean Cask Strength that I picked up from Nc'Nean Distillery in my fourth trip to Scotland. My fourth trip to Scotland, I went to the Western Scotland, went to the Western Isles, went to Raasay, and I went to Talisker, and I went to Torveig, went to Ardnamurchan, and went to Nc'Nean. Now, Nc'Nean is way in the heck out there. On the way there, you might be wondering if you're actually on the right road. And the only thing that's indicating you're on the right way is your GPS, because dirt roads, weird angles, you're in the woods, a lot of single track, a lot of blind curves, a lot of potholes, and maybe you're wishing you had a four-wheel drive, a Jeep or something like that, because you're a little scared you might get stuck out there. So what I want to do a little bit different in this video is not only have I poured myself 2 drams, but we're going to add a little bit of water. With the magic of editing, because I had forgot to get myself some water. But I'm only going to put it in one of them. I'm going to put it on my one on the left. And I think I'm going to put 2 in here. So, in my previous 3 trips, I've been as far south on the lowlands as Bladnoch, Annandale, been to Islay twice, been to Isle of Arran, been to Campbelltown twice, went to the Springbank Whiskey School, been up to the Highlands and Speyside twice, been all the way up to Orkney, so it is quite an adventure traveling all over Scotland. But I would say the most adventurous in terms of being a little uncertain to your travels and where you're going, and wondering if your car breaks down, what the heck it is you're going to do. It's actually the Western Isles. But with a little bit of faith, a little bit of hope, and a little bit of luck, you make it. Now, why am I doing this? This is an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous bottle. Really, really pretty. I like the container as well. If I didn't know better, just from the overall design, it has almost like a Japanese look to it because it's so pretty. And this whiskey is pretty as well. But before I get into this, let me show you a tour around Nc'Nean Distillery and give you some notes about this distillery. Nc'Nean Distillery is located in Nc'Nean on the Morven Peninsula of the Highlands in Scotland. Nc'Nean Distillery was founded in 2017. Nc'Nean is owned by the Nc'Nean Distillery Company. The distillery name Nc'Nean comes from a Gaelic word which translates as Queen of Spirits. The distillery is located beside the Sound of Mull, opposite the Isle of Mull. They have a stainless steel mash tun, a stainless steel washback, and 2 stills, 1 wash still and 1 spirit still. The distillery focuses on producing an organic spirit with a minimum impact on the local environment. The distillery was the first in the UK to reach net zero carbon emissions during whiskey production. The distillery uses renewable electricity, offsets emissions by forest planting, and uses 100% recycled glass in its bottles. The whiskey is unpeated. The Nc'Nean Cask Strength Single Malt Scotch Whisky. It was aged in bourbon cask, wine cask, and sherry cask. It has natural color, it is non-chill filtered, and it's bottled at 59.6% alcohol by volume. So one of the things I tend to say a lot is don't judge a whiskey by a neck pour, because usually it's going to get better as it continues to open up. But this one I actually really liked from a neck pour. As you let it breathe, and if you add a little bit of water, particularly with cask strength, not only do you sort of break the surface tension of the oils, which then brings out more of the aromatics, a whiskey, particularly if it's near the top, can seem somewhat disjointed, like the components aren't really harmonized, and you add a little bit of water and then it becomes more harmonized. That doesn't always happen, but it happens sometimes. If they haven't chill filtered and brought out a lot of the goodness out of the whiskey, you can kind of play around with it in this way. Now, when I first tried this whiskey from a neck pour, it was real pretty, and all the various components from the different type of casks that they use were very distinct and separate. Now, normally you're going to say, well, I really want more harmony, I want these to be more intermingled. But I really liked the way that the different components came out. There was, you'd smell it, and then you put it back, and you come and approach it again, and you get something different. And so it was something different every time you came back to the whiskey. And more, I would say more drastically and more radically than I ever had with any other whiskey. There was just so much going on and having these different characteristics at different times. And I really liked it. Then when I started playing around with it more and putting water into it and to breathe more, I found that those components became more intermingled, which is good too. But I was kind of enjoying distinguishing different characteristics. So what I want to do is come back to it and we'll nose both of them side by side, see the differences, and then taste them as well. So from the neck pour, the wine cask notes were really sticking out. They have already, even just with more aeration, and now I'm getting past the shoulder, become more intermingled. Now, because it's such a wide bottle with a short neck, it doesn't look like I've delved into it that much versus a more slender bottle where as soon as you get past the neck pour, you're already starting to break the shoulder. But I've had enough of this to really see where it's going. They're not that different now, which I'm kind of disappointed by. I really liked it when there was just like this distinctive, it's like listening to a bunch of musical instruments, but each one maintaining its distinctiveness and enjoying each one separately. But you know, really ultimately what you want is the whole band to play together, because that's what music is all about. Same thing that's going on here. There's slight red fruit notes. This is not a term that I use very often about whiskeys or for whiskeys or a common descriptor. It is a very pretty whiskey. Some red floral notes. There's some roses. There's an orange citrus, which is probably coming from the sherry cask. That dried orange character you typically get. Vanilla, a lot of spice, some ginger, cinnamon, sort of a sage note, herbal note. Another one with water. More of the fruit notes coming out on this with the one with water than without the water. Play around with your whiskey. If you're new to whiskey and not used to playing around with it, experiment. Play around with it. Try a little bit of water. Even, I know people are going to get upset I say this, try it on ice. Sometimes a whiskey on ice will bring out more of the cask characteristics than the spirit characteristics or the fermentation notes, but more of the cask. Play around with ice. People say, oh, it diminishes the notes. No, it diminishes some of it, which then accentuates other parts. I have found, oftentimes with whiskeys, the ice will diminish some notes, mainly the fermentation notes from a whiskey, but accentuate the cask notes, particularly with bourbons. Orange citrus, lemon, vanilla, that ginger spice, cinnamon, vanilla. It hasn't radically changed. All right. So this whiskey changes quite a bit from the neck pour into when you get past the shoulder, but in a different. It's not like one is necessarily better than the other. It's just very, very different. I would say 99.99% of the time, a whiskey improves from the neck pour past the shoulder, maybe even more when you get about halfway down. This one has changed quite radically, but not necessarily for better or for worse. It's just really, really different. And this is one that I just happen to really like from the neck pour. On the palate, well, I'm going to start on the left. Since the ABV should be a little lower with the water, I'm going to start on the left with the water. The maltiness really comes through. Oh, this is another note that I thought was great about this whiskey. Even though this is cask strength, it was light, it was delicate, it was pretty, it was not harsh, and yet, even though it doesn't have new makey characteristics of like a real young whiskey, you can tell there's some youth going there. They're sort of, in a way, doing something that Raasay Distillery is doing, which is, hey, we have a young whiskey, we are a young distillery, like Torvig and Raasay and these more Western distilleries. Talisker is old in comparison to these, or Ardnamurchan. They're saying, okay, we have a young spirit. How do we bring some balance and more characteristics to these whiskeys? Let's use multiple casks. Torvig, not so much, but Raasay, they're using distinctive casks, particularly rye cask to bring in some spice notes. So they're using different casks for this whiskey to bring in different characteristics, and I think it's working really, really well. What Nc'Nean has done that maybe some of these other younger distilleries out in the west of Scotland and on the Isles, this doesn't have that sharp, youthful bite. Neat. Sure, you can tell the presence of alcohol, but it's not an attack on your tongue to where you feel like you just have to put some water into it. A lot of times a youthful bite, you almost wince, you almost cringe, you almost reel from it. It's like, whoa, I got to do something to bring this down. Otherwise, it's not a real drinkable whiskey. It's not approachable. This whiskey is not like that. Of course, you want to go slow, not go crazy with it. But this, at cask strength, is very approachable. Yeah, there's a little bit of almost a spice tingle there, but nowhere near some of these other cask strength whiskeys like Raasay or Torvig. It is very, very, very approachable. It's also creamy and oily on the mid palate, so it's real silky. It's definitely showing some bourbon cask and wine cask influence. There's almost like a raspberry, strawberry, sort of a jam character going on there. There's that dried orange, vanilla. There's a little bit of a cream. There's hints of spice. It's got really, really nice transitions, and it's got a nice long finish. I am still tasting it now. And it's got a really nice, it's not as squishy, sorry, it's not as squishy as some of the other cask strength whiskeys, like Ardnamurchan. It's kind of thick and squishy on the palate. It's not squishy, but it has a nice silky soft texture. Getting past the shoulder and adding water to it doesn't hurt it, but it doesn't necessarily radically change it either. I'm liking them both. The one thing the water does is bring down that tingling character a little bit, but it's not a radical change in terms of aromas and flavors. It's still, in many ways, light, delicate. There's almost a way in which the flavors sort of hover above your palate. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. I love the transitions on this. I love the finish on this. This is a really, really nice whiskey. And for a really young distillery, I'm kind of surprised at the quality of this whiskey. It doesn't fool you into thinking that it's older than it is, but you also don't feel like you're drinking new make that has just been masked with a bunch of casks. They've done a fantastic job in cask management and with the spirit. It's just really, really, really well done. I'm really, really impressed with this whiskey. This is a very distinct whiskey. It's unlike anything else I think in Scotland. Tasting this blind, I wouldn't think this was from the western part of the Highlands or the islands out there. A lot of the whiskeys I've had from the Western Islands have a medium to medium plus intensity of peat. This is unpeated. This is non-smoky. If I'm trying to think of something else that this could be like, I don't know. Nothing. I mean, maybe Glenturret. Maybe a little bit like Glenturret. That's the closest I can think of. And I'm a big fan of Glenturret whiskeys. What would I give it in terms of score? I'm going to go solid 90 points. Solid 90 points. Particularly the length of finish and just how pretty and delicate this whiskey is. But it's a very distinctive whiskey. This is a whiskey I think you'd have to be in the mood for. Some people might be offended by this. I think this has a lot of feminine characteristics to it because it's so pretty. It's like a lovely woman in a very pretty dress. That's how I would describe it. So if you have had Nc'Nean, let me know what you've had and let me know if you liked it. They're not real easy to come by. I have seen some in stores. They're not really easy to come by, and I don't know how readily available this cask strength is. But if you take the adventure and go all the way out to Nc'Nean Distillery, you're going to want to pick up a bottle. The one thing that bothered me is after I went to Nc'Nean, I went to Tobermory Distillery. You can see Tobermory from Nc'Nean. You can see right across the water, and yet there's no ferry or anything that'll take you over to Tobermory. And so instead, you have to drive all the way around. And by the time I left Nc'Nean and got to the town of Tobermory, it was late at night. It was late at night. It's a long drive and a ferry ride. So I went to Tobermory the next morning. All right, that's it for this video. If you subscribe to this channel, well, thank you very much. If you've not yet subscribed, but you like watching my videos, I would ask that you subscribe. Ring the bell to be notified when I go live or post a new video. And until next time, Salanja. Y'all come back now, you hear? Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.